This one looked interesting. What they're missing about ICE, immigration, and protests. Protests are in quotes. That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
The common thread across
Shut up. This guy's an idiot.
all the left wing viewpoints on ICE
I
that
knew
you're
it.
seeing is that the left repeatedly does not consider or prioritize incentives and like policy needing to be structured around incentives and consequences and
Uh-huh.
how that shapes people's behavior.
Right, right,
Like with
yeah.
immigration policy in general, just enforcing our immigration laws, they think we should just abolish ICE. So they don't think about these second order effects of, okay, what would happen if we actually did that? What sort of incentive structure does that create? If we had no consequences for coming.
Look, I don't say abolish ICE, but I'll tell you, if we abolished ICE, it would affect a lot less people negatively than, say, cutting food stamps, cutting social services, cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, and all that stuff. So, I mean, I don't say abolish ICE, but the way they're acting right now, they probably deserve to get abolished, to be honest. I mean, we have Border Patrol already, so why not? Why not abolish ICE? What are the ramifications of that? What are the consequences that we don't understand that this this young chud is going to educate us about?
Illegally, then our country would immediately be flooded by millions more illegal immigrants. And they don't think about the second order effects of that or the third order
What
effects of
about Border Patrol, dude? Pretty sure ICE's job is not so much to stop people from coming through the border. That's Border Patrol, man.
whenever those millions of illegal immigrants got here, what would that cause? Well, we have a limited supply of housing, for one. So immediately it would drastically increase the demand for housing, which would drastically increase the price of housing, and it would drastically increase rents. It would drastically increase the price of groceries because you again have pretty limited supply of things. You have the same number of businesses here that are producing food, groceries, but suddenly you have this drastically increased
Okay.
demand. So that would drastically
The immigrants eat food. The immigrants eat food. What do you think will happen if they come over here? They're gonna eat food.
increase the price of groceries as well. That's a third order effect. So like second
Oh,
order effect of no immigration policy, abolish ICE, whatever, would be that we would get flooded by millions of illegal immigrants. The third order effect
again, what abolishing ICE? Why would that result in millions of immigrants coming through the border? Isn't there a border and border patrol for that? Seems like ICE is more the guys who you know, kind of need the border to be sort of open or else they're not going to have a job. They're already having to look for new people to arrest. They're already arresting people that sure, they're not properly here, but they are documented being here and they've been here for 10 years or are in the middle of an immigration case which is so backlogged that it can take years and years to happen. They're going after those people now and deporting them. What would happen if we had a totally closed border and no one could get in? I feel like then you'd abolish ICE. It's sort of like abolishing ICE is a good idea no matter what, almost.
would be that the price of things would go up because the demand curve drastically expanded. Now that you have millions
The
more
demand
people
curve.
here,
This
you have
guy's so
millions more
smart.
people to house, millions more mouths to feed. And so they repeatedly do not think about incentive structures and how that shapes
It's
behavior
true,
and
yeah.
how those behaviors have second order, third order effects on our society.
Uh-huh.
And you see this also with how they've responded to ISIS's kind of response to these belligerent citizens who are violently, oftentimes, resisting, impeding, agitating, interfering with law enforcement, the enforcement of federal laws that the people voted for.
Violently
These are
resisting
not
what? Violently resisting violence? They just said, okay, ICE gets to do whatever they want. They don't have to have warrants or permission and they have federal immunity. Like, they just decided that. And so that's federal law now, I guess, technically, but
Enforcement of federal laws that the people voted for. This is not a tyrannical regime. They are not enforcing laws against the consent of the governed. These are laws that people vote.
yeah, I think they are going against the consent of the governed, right? Those are the people that are protesting.
When people see ICE fighting with these protesters who are being belligerent, and I'm not saying that's every case, but whenever people are being violent and forceful and intentionally intimidating, harassing, agitating federal law enforcement officers, there have to be consequences for that.
Murder.
Or else people will just do it in mass. There have to be consequences for coming here illegally, and there have to be consequences for violently and belligerently resisting the enforcement of federal laws that the American people voted for. There have to be consequences to disincentivize these things, or else people will do them.
Change any laws pertaining to ICE. Yes, during his second presidency, Donald Trump implemented significant changes to immigration enforcement laws, including expanding the powers of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE. So he expanded their powers, okay, and increasing deportation efforts. These changes included aggressive tactics and policies that aim to meet strict deportation goals. Man, quotas don't belong in arenas like this, man. When you're dealing with human beings, there should not be a quota incentive. Speaking of isn't this guy like these leftists? They don't understand incentive structures. How's that for an incentive structure? Is that a good incentive structure to you? That they have to meet a certain number?
There have to be consequences to disincentivize these things, or else people will do them in far greater numbers. And I know
You're talking about protesting, dude. You're talking about protesting right now, which is a legally protected activity. We need to crack down harder so that people are just too scared to protest. Yeah, this isn't a tyrannical regime at all.
or else people will do them in far greater numbers. And I know some leftists might fantasize about that sort of thing because they only think of that second order effect, like, okay, well, then we could just protest as violently as we want. Well, what happens then? Then law and order just becomes a nothing burger. Like, you don't have any enforcement whenever someone decides to attack a law enforcement officer. So why
What about when a law enforcement officer decides to attack a U.S. citizen? That is happening more than the opposite.
That cannot be allowed. There have to be negative, unpleasant consequences for doing that. Just like there have to be negative, unpleasant consequences for coming to this country illegally. Like people.
Oh, I thought he was going to say for using excessive force and killing U.S. citizens. I guess not.
Again, it's about thinking of incentive structures. What sort of behavior does the.
Yeah, leftists don't know how to think about incentive structures and behavior like this guy can.
It's about incentives. And just.
Okay, let's talk about incentives. If you incentivize ICE to meet a quota, then after they run out of the people they know are here illegally and are criminals, then they have to go to the people they know are here illegally but are not criminals. And then that means they're going to start arresting people that have friends and coworkers and a life and children here, and their community is going to get pissed off. Then their community is going to protest, and that's going to create a situation where you have a paramilitary group based out of the United States killing United States civilians on American soil. This guy really thinks he's onto something here. Like, he really thinks he's got something here, and it's hilarious. It's all about incentives.
It's about incentives. And
It's about
the
incentives.
third thing that I think, so you've got just coming here illegally. That's the first thing people aren't considering. So I think people are just not considering the incentive structures here. But the third thing that I would say that people just aren't thinking through fully is the standards that we hold these ICE officers to. Like, I agree there should be an investigation into any time a civilian gets shot and killed by an ICE officer.
Do you agree that it should be a self-investigation?
I think there should obviously be an investigation, but people are holding them to these impossible standards. They're saying, well, didn't you see in that split second where they take the gun away while there are multiple people crossing bodies covering each other, where there's probably a lot of noise, a lot of yelling, but look, they took the gun away and then he shot him. And it's like, okay, well, could a human being have reasonably perceived that a gun was taken away? That will require investigation to determine, but it's like people expect ICE officers to have these robotic senses, but they are nonetheless human beings. They have human limits. Excuse my laundry. They have.
It was happening fast and it was loud. It's one guy. He's on his knees. There's no way that you saw him holding a gun because they had already taken the gun. What did you see that made you feel you had to shoot this guy in the fucking back? I don't think we're asking these people to be robots. Don't take my word for it. There's career law enforcement people that have looked at that video and said it looks like a group of untrained amateurs, because that's what it is. If you kill somebody, it's not inhumane to be punished for that. It's not inhumane to be arrested and charged when you kill somebody. That's just the normal expectation.
Human limits. So they can't just see where everything is at all times. They can't detect whether or not someone has a weapon. And if they have seen that someone has a weapon, they can't automatically detect whether that weapon has been taken away from them or not. And if they seize a weapon on someone and then a firearm goes off, it's maybe reasonable to assume that the person who they were trying to detain was the one who discharged that weapon. And maybe then it's reasonable to assume that you need to neutralize that threat. Otherwise, your life and the life of the officers around you.
So he's trying to excuse shots number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. He's saying, how does the other guy that shot second, how does he know that that first shot didn't come from the guy that they have, face down on the ground? I mean, what about the guy who fired the first shot?
Whether or not someone has a weapon, and if they have seen that someone has a weapon, they can't automatically detect whether that weapon has been taken away from them or not. And if they seize a weapon on someone.
I've never been in the armed forces, I've never been a cop, but I'm pretty sure you're supposed to communicate something like that. If you take a weapon off somebody, you're probably supposed to say something to the rest of your team. So you don't need some magical ability to detect things. One of the guys took the gun off and he should have told the other guys what he was doing, that he has the gun, secured the firearm, whatever.
Firearm goes off, it's maybe reasonable to assume that the person who they were trying to detain was the one who discharged that weapon.
He's not even touching the first shots. He's just trying to defend the shots that came after. ICE agent number 2 didn't know that the shot came from ICE agent number 1. Maybe he thought the shot was coming from the guy that they had face down on the ground. What about the first shot? Because the first shot wasn't in response to a shot. It was the first shot. And it did not come from the guy who was face down, being held down by like 7 people whose gun had just been taken away.
But nobody wants to wait for the evidence. Everybody just wants to hold ICE officers to these impossible standards, and that is another...
Nobody wants to wait for the DHS to investigate itself and come up with a million reasons why what we're seeing in a video is not what happened. And we don't even have to wait for the investigation because they already were doing that. Immediately after it happened, they were doing that. They did it in both cases. They're saying that these killings were justified, people were domestic terrorists. And I mean, I get that they're walking the second one back a little bit, but that's just because some people on the right who love the Second Amendment were like, hey, wait a second. That's a white guy who carries a gun. He looks like me. So then Trump had to say, yeah, we're going to dial it back, blah, 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 blah. None of it is a genuine effort to find truth or enact justice. And yeah, buddy, people don't have to wait for an investigation that A, they already know is fraudulent, and when they B, have a video that shows exactly what happened. It's not that complicated.
No, you have to wait till Trump says what it is.
And that is another instance in which people aren't thinking about incentives. So you have to consider incentives whenever you're thinking about incentives. So if you have bad incentive structures,
Nothing you said in this is at all new. None of this is stuff that people don't think about. People think about all this stuff. You're just, I don't know, you're just kind of a moron.
up with a bad society.
This guy sucks, dude.